The movie opens as a fisherman named Syracuse trawls his boat off the coast of Ireland. He hasn't had a good catch for the past few weeks, and today looks no different. After hours of hard work at the sea, he hauls back his net into the boat, only to find a woman in it. Syracuse notices that she's still alive, so he quickly frees and resuscitates her. The woman gasps for breath and soon regains consciousness. Syracuse then tells her to lay down and promises to get her medical attention as soon as possible. However, the woman begs him not to take her to the hospital. She clearly doesn't want to go to any place with a lot of people, and even tries to jump back into the sea. Fearing for the stranger's life, Syracuse stops her and promises to take her to a place where no one will see her. It'll be a sexy place for sure. Following this, he takes her to his deceased mother's caravan. He reveals that his old lady used to be a loner, so no one knows about this place. The duo then have a chat for a few minutes, after which Syracuse leaves for urgent work. Soon afterwards, he arrives at the home of his ex-wife Maura. He is there to pick up their daughter Annie, who suffers from double kidney failure. Maura scolds him for being late, but Syracuse ignores her and takes the little girl to a nearby mobile clinic. During her dialysis, Annie desires to hear a story, so Syracuse tells her about the events that occurred earlier, but masquerades it as a fairy tale. His daughter wonders if the woman was a Selkie, but Syracuse is unfamiliar with the word. The little girl then explains that Selkies are mythical, seal-like women who can sing magical songs. A Selkie would occasionally leave the sea, lose her seal coat, and live on land until the sea calls her back. Upon hearing this, Syracuse is intrigued, but he chooses not to inquire further. The dialysis soon ends, and he drops Annie back off with her mom. What, no ice cream? Kind of a divorced dad, are you? The following day, Syracuse heads to the caravan and finds the mysterious woman singing by the stream. He then prepares his boat to go fishing, and the woman insists on joining him. Syracuse thinks it's unlucky to have a woman on board, but he lets her join anyway. During their trip, he asks about the song she was singing earlier. The woman, however, doesn't remember where she'd heard it first. He then asks if she remembers her name, and the lady tells him to call her Ondine, a French word for a girl who came from the water. As the day goes on, you find that Syracuse's lobster traps have caught nothing. It looks like he will have to return empty-handed once more. At this moment, Ondine begins singing while the fisherman hauls another trap. To his surprise, he finally manages to catch a lobster. Ondine then keeps on singing while he lowers several other traps into the sea. He then pulls them out after a few minutes and almost magically catches several lobsters. This convinces him that Ondine's song is bringing him good fortune, and if she is truly from the sea, that she is betraying and murdering her people in a big way here. The next day, Syracuse picks up Annie from her school, and the little girl insists on racing him home in her motorized wheelchair. She also asks him to continue his story from the other day. Syracuse obliges that every time she sang, the fisherman caught more fish, almost as if she had magic in her voice. He leaves out the part where he got a big boner when this was all going down. Soon afterwards, the duo reaches home and Syracuse bids his daughter goodbye for the day. He then proceeds towards the caravan, unaware that the little girl is following him. It turns out Annie is curious about his story and suspects that it may be real. Soon enough, her suspicions are confirmed when she sneaks near the caravan and sees a woman in there. Meanwhile, inside, Syracuse wonders how long Ondine plans to stay here. The woman replies that it depends on him, and he quickly responds that she can stay forever. Syracuse also shares that he's been telling his daughter about her, but making it seem like a fairy tale. This makes the woman smile, and she watches on romantically as he leaves. After discovering her father's secret, Annie heads to the library, where she borrows books about Selkies. Meanwhile, Syracuse goes to the church to confess to the local priest. "Father, forgive me, for I have filleted a fish." He begins by saying he was once an alcoholic, but has been sober for the past 2 years. His ex-wife, on the other hand, hasn't stopped drinking, putting Annie's health in jeopardy. Syracuse also reveals that he hauled out a woman during a fishing trip. The priest doesn't take this last confession seriously, but encourages him to keep him updated on his developments. The following day, Annie heads to the caravan while her father is at work. She finds Ondine swimming in the water and loudly exclaims that her dad's story is indeed real. When the woman hears this, she immediately realizes that the little girl is Syracuse's daughter. Following this, the two have a conversation during which Annie asks questions based on the books she read. She inquires about her seal coat, but Ondine has never even heard that term before. So, Annie explains that a Selkie loses her natural coat when she gets on land and can't return until she finds it. If she retrieves retrieves it, she can bury it in the ground and stay on land for 7 years. Ondine enjoys her stories and kisses her on the cheek before telling her to go back home. Later that afternoon, Ondine once again joins Syracuse on a fishing trip. He assigns her to steer the boat, but when another ship passes nearby, she quickly hides. Ondine still doesn't want anyone to see her and starts steering using her feet. Once they reach a safe distance, she begins singing her usual song. Syracuse has no idea what it means, but just like the last time, he gets a big catch. To his surprise, the trawling nets have also caught a lot of salmon this time. This is highly unusual, as salmon usually require finer, smaller nets. Just as he's collecting the catch, the local fisheries board patrol arrives nearby and heads towards his boat. Syracuse then signals Ondine to hide under the boat's deck, as she doesn't want to be seen by other people. A few minutes later, the patrollers come aboard and begin inspecting the boat. They notice that Syracuse has caught salmon, which makes them suspicious. The two officers then investigate his equipment, which eventually leads them to discover Ondine. But Syracuse points out that a woman on board may be unusual, but it is not illegal. Just because most fishermen are incels doesn't mean we don't want to leave without taking any action. Following the close call, the two head to the harbor together, where a mysterious man is keeping a close eye on Ondine. After selling their latest catch, Ondine joins Syracuse in town to buy some new clothes. They soon bump into Annie, who reveals that she and Ondine have already met. Upon hearing this, Syracuse is briefly stunned, but he lets the girl join in and they go shopping together. A few days pass by and Ondine starts becoming close to Annie. One afternoon, she offers to teach the little girl how to swim. They both then head to a nearby dock, where Ondine gently helps Annie float on water. However, while they are fooling around near the bank, Ondine stumbles over something underwater. She then puts Annie on the pier and retrieves what appears to be a huge jute sack from a seaweed bush. It is obvious that she knows what the bag contains, but is surprised to find it here. On the other hand, Annie thinks it's her seal coat and encourages her to bury it so that she can stay with them for 7 years. Go on, just dig a hole for your skin. The scene shifts to the two burying the jute sack in an abandoned greenhouse near the caravan. Ondine asks Annie to never talk about this with anyone, as it is their secret. That evening, Syracuse drops the little girl back home and heads back to the caravan. He then has a chat with Ondine, during which he reveals that he and his ex-wife were both alcoholics. Syracuse stopped drinking when one night he found Annie lying unconscious while Maura was passed out drunk. This convinced him that at least one of them should be sober to keep their daughter safe. However, it also ended their marriage. Given that Irish laws don't award custody to fishermen who are often away from home, Annie ended up with Maura. Upon hearing this, Ondine feels bad and comforts him, but one thing leads to another, and they eventually make love. And at the climax, she goes, "Or." The following day, Syracuse visits the local church for a confession. Since keeping secrets drives him mad, he tells the priest that Ondine brings him luck, but he's afraid that something is about to happen. He is not sure if it will be wonderful, like marriage, or terrible. He may have gotten crabs. After the confession, Syracuse is approached by a mysterious man outside the church. This is the same man who was looking for Ondine at the dock. He asks Syracuse about her, but the latter ignores him. Following this, Syracuse takes Annie to her dialysis appointment, where she reveals that she had a nightmare. She appears to be scared, but Syracuse reassures her that everything will be okay. He even holds her hand throughout the session to make her comfortable. When they return home, Maura is nowhere to be seen, so they head to town looking for her. In the meantime, the mysterious man has located Syracuse's caravan and drives there. He looks around the property, which gives Ondine enough time to sneak through the back door and hide in the nearby greenhouse. Elsewhere, Syracuse finds Maura and her boyfriend Alex at the pub. They refuse to give him their house keys and insist Annie will be fine hanging out with them. Syracuse is against it, but he changes his mind when his daughter reassures him that she'll be okay. He then returns to the caravan, but is shocked to find it ransacked. Frightened, Syracuse begins looking around the property, calling for Ondine, but the man who came looking for her. Syracuse asks who the man is, to which she reveals it's her Selkie husband. Syracuse isn't fully convinced with the answer, but recalls Annie once telling him that Selkies can grant one wish. He suggests that Ondine can wish the man go away, but she refuses and instead wishes for Annie's good health. Meanwhile, we see the mysterious man driving back into town. A drunk Maura is also driving home with Alex and Annie in the back seat. Due to her carelessness, the two vehicles collide, and Alex is killed on the spot. But Annie had her seatbelt on, and she escapes with just minor bruises. Soon, Syracuse and Ondine discover the accident, and they rush to the hospital. Annie wakes up hours later, and a doctor pulls her father aside with rather surprising news. He reveals that Alex was registered as a donor, and his kidneys are a match for Annie. With the man now dead, they immediately perform a transplant transplant to save the girl's life. Ondine's wish fucking killed that dude. Later, while Syracuse sits by his daughter's side in the post-op room, Ondine is praying outside in the hallway. There, she passes by the mysterious man who was brought to the hospital as he has also suffered some injuries in the accident. He yells at her in a foreign language, but she also shouts back, telling him to go home. Days later, Alex's funeral is held, where an injured Mora scatters his ashes into the sea. Syracuse sympathizes with his ex-wife, feeling guilty over what happened. However, Mora assures him that he wasn't at fault. She then asks him to take Annie to his home, since she can't handle watching over her while she's recovering. Following this, they head to Alex's wake at the pub, where Mora manipulates Syracuse into drinking several glasses of alcohol. Later, she tells him to get rid of Ondine. Mora argues that she brought him good luck first, and now it's time for the bad part. Syracuse was finally beginning to have hope in life with the arrival of Ondine, but after the accident where his daughter narrowly escaped, he starts dreaming about all the possible bad things. That evening, Syracuse drunkenly heads to his boat, where Ondine has been hiding from the mysterious man. He is heavily intoxicated and decides to send her back to where she came from. He then drags her out to the deck and questions about her husband. Ondine tries to clarify that she isn't married, but Syracuse doesn't want to listen. He insists that she's better off at the sea and takes her towards a lighthouse not far off from the dock. Syracuse's rude behavior shocks Ondine, and she is deeply hurt by his mean words, but she doesn't say a word and accepts his decision. Shortly after, Syracuse departs from there, alone, convinced that their fairy tale has to end to stop further tragedies. The following day, the local priest finds a hungover Syracuse on a tree. He asks the fisherman if everything is okay, and the latter goes on a long rant about how his life is simply miserable. The priest tells him that it is easy to lie down and accept misery, while happiness takes work. Hearing this, reality hits Syracuse hard, and he slowly begins to realize his mistakes. In the next scene, he heads to the hospital and finally takes Annie to his home. She asks back to the sea with some personal work. This upsets the little girl, but she's sure that Ondine will be back, as she hasn't taken her seal coat. The following day, Annie is watching TV when Syracuse hears Ondine's song from a foreign singer. He learns that the song comes from an Icelandic band and is not a tune from a mysterious underwater realm. This makes him believe that Ondine was actually a human and not some mythical Selkie. Therefore, he tells Annie to stay home and heads to the lighthouse. Upon arrival, he spots Ondine on the shore near the lighthouse. She sarcastically claims to have joined the seals basking in the sun. She then asks what made him return, so he explains that he heard her song on the TV. The fisherman now wants the truth, and Ondine finally reveals that she was a drug mule from Romania, not a fish mule from the depths. On the day Syracuse found her, she was on a boat to deliver illegal substances, but the Coast Guards caught them. The mysterious man Vladek was her handler, and he forced her to escape with their supplies since she couldn't swim. However, the land was too far, so Ondine discarded the bag of supplies and let herself sink into the water. This was when she coincidentally fell into Syracuse's net, and he saved her. Syracuse is shocked by the truth. How could a seal come up with such an elaborate story? But he also feels bad for Ondine, so he takes her home. However, upon arrival, they are greeted by Vladek, who has held Annie hostage. He has also made her confess that Ondine had recently discovered her seal coat. The little girl is unaware that it was a jute sack with several illegal substances inside, but now Vladek knows Ondine still has it. He threatens her to hand the sack over or he will hurt Annie. Scared, Ondine immediately takes him to the greenhouse, but discovers that the bag is missing. This enrages Vladek, and he reacts by repeatedly slamming a nearby shovel on the ground. Scared that he might hurt them, Annie admits that it was her who hid the seal coat in a lobster trap on her father's boat. The scene then shifts to the boat, where Vladek holds up the lobster cage from the water while holding the others at gunpoint. At this moment, Ondine remembers that her handler can't swim, and this gives her an idea. She suddenly pulls on the rope Vladek is standing on, making him fall overboard. He pleads for help and struggles for a while, but nobody decides to help him. In the end, he sinks into the ocean to his death. The movie ends as we see Syracuse marrying Ondine on the same boat where they met. He didn't like that she was a drug mule, but now that he's an accomplice to murder, it comes out in the wash. And so, the two live happily ever after, and we'll never know how he caught that salmon. Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on notifications, and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.